So I do have a couple questions though, and I really want to know about the figure skating versus ballerina thing. I'm curious about that because that obviously you could have been a hockey player probably too with figure skating, ballerina, hockey. I mean, did you play hockey?
I didn't, and I'm not particularly hard. I think I would have been a bit scared. I'm clumsy. Yeah. Ella's nodding.
Really? How did you two meet? That's the one that
we met in this place in North London that's a sort of bar thing, and neither of us ever really go to North London, and it was a rare night that Pietra had off from the Royal Ballet, and her boyfriend at the time was DJing, and I had a cousin in town, and I didn't really want to go out, but we did. So it was a bit like fate and stars aligned, because in no other circumstance would we have been in North London in that bar. It was just something magic happened. And what was kind of interesting about how our relationship has gone is that we started by working together straight away. So we found this kind of creative bond. It wasn't a friendship that then we thought, oh, should we try something? It was, this kind of creative, amazing match that then blossomed into basically the marriage that we have now.
Sisters Grimm.
Yeah.
So what was the first project?
Our first project was Grimm.
Yeah, sorry.
It was Rapunzel, the final chapter, and it was a film shot at the Royal Opera House in London. First time the Opera House had ever shot something like that, with the most incredible cinematic team with us. In 2009, that was. And
that was our first Sisters Grimm project.
Yeah.
But the first project that we ever worked on together was before that, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
And what was that one?
That was Lionel Feeney, a surrealist artist that we brought to life through a ballet piece that was presented at the Royal Opera House again. Ella composed the music and recorded the score at Abbey Road. And it was sort of from that project that we realized we really make stuff happen. And that's when we set up Sisters Grimm, after we'd worked together on that.
Has there ever been sort of a second thought where you kind of go, I don't know if this is going to work? Have you ever had that? No. I get the sense that both of you just kind of look at things and say, you know what, there's a challenge here. This sounds like a lot of fun, and let's just get out here and do it.
I'll tell you, the only thing that sometimes makes us go, not sure about this, is when we don't have the right people, or when there's someone attached who's rocking the boat in a way that isn't helping us fulfill what the project could be. And that was, in the end, I think one of the ways that we ended up going, realizing that there was some magic between us, was that we had someone else in the mix who just wasn't free enough. And I mean mentally free enough, really. And that was holding us back. So we thought, right, let's do this, just us, really.
So when you get a situation like that, I'm just curious, because this is kind of like a businessy kind of thing. But when you get a person in the, who's come into the team, or, you're working on a project and you get that toxic person, or that person who's not thinking down your lives, do you just sort of give them their walking orders and say, hey, thank you very much, but we'll try something else another day?
No, we do always give everyone sort of, I think, probably too much in a way of an opportunity to try to make it work, and sometimes that can lead to it being harder, I think, to then cut. Over the years, to be completely frank about it, I think that is only something that you learn with experience. We have had many people that in hindsight now, when we look back at the journey, where we go, we really, now we'd cut it straight away. In fact, there are people that we had part of certain things that we wouldn't have even, we wouldn't even entertain. We wouldn't consider at all.
We understand that we have a company culture. We understand how we work, our style and everything. And now we have the confidence and the expertise to, own being the female bosses as well. And we just wouldn't put up with half the stuff we did back then now.
So when I look at your profiles, they're both very different profiles, but I kind of see where it all links in together. Tell me a little bit about those early days. Tell me a little bit about finding your common ground and that creative respect that you give each other. Tell me those stories.
Who's going to start?
You start.
Well, from my perspective, I was at the Royal Ballet, and I was
not just for a few years either.
Oh yeah, my career at the Royal Ballet spanned 13 years, but I met Ella in 2008, and I was always inspired. I was always working on projects. I didn't know I was a creative producer. I was just collaborating with people and working on projects and making things happen.
Did anyone ever in that whole process, and you're collaborating and doing, did anyone ever just say, hey, you're a creative producer?
No, of course no.
They couldn't do that.
No. And it was, I was really inspired by Diaghilev, who formed Ballet Russe and commissioned Tchaikovsky to write the score for everything that we still hear now at Christmas, Nutcracker, Swan Lake, you name it, those pieces live on. And he wasn't a dancer or a composer or an artist. He was the producer. And I was inspired by him. And then when I met my Tchaikovsky, Ella, everything clicked into place. And we could really work on things that I'm sort of really operational driven, the detail, the things like that. And Ella's big vision and ideas. And together it was the absolute perfect mix.
That's kind of cool.
I think one of the other things is that from the beginning, we've had total trust in each other's barometer of quality and ability to deliver. And I don't know why we both had that in each other, but we totally did. And I think it was that made us realize that what we had together was completely different to relationships that we had with other people. And at that time, I was writing music for film, for small theatre projects, and some bigger theatre projects, and a whole load of things sort of in between, commercials and stuff like that. But I was always a bit frustrated by I think wanting to be able to help more or something, or so I don't know. I found myself more and more sort of feeling a bit like I'm not quite doing what I want here. And it was definitely, meeting Pietra, that missing piece of, oh, hang on, this is because actually we can have ideas together that we can realize, and that we can bring an amazing team together to collaborate with us, and sometimes some people that are not so amazing that we wouldn't allow in now, but that we then kind of create these pools of people that do something magic together. And it really speaks to people. And I think that's through what's happened in the pandemic and our sort of diversification into slightly different formats. We're still achieving exactly the same thing, because we're coming from that same authentic, true, real artistic place. And ultimately, collaboration is totally at its core, which I think is our big defining factor in a way.
The pandemic has obviously been a huge change for everyone. It's had an interesting effect for you guys. As you said, it's caused you to think a little bit differently about what you're producing, how you're delivering it. Can you walk me through that and what had to happen for the two of you in your thought process to pivot from where you were, what was going on, to where you're going? And obviously the doors are still open for those much larger things as well, but it's a different kind of construction that you've gotten into.
Yeah, it's been amazing to see our audience grow through this new avenue and having to go more digital. Our track record is in huge live theatrical shows that tour globally, involve lots of people from different countries flying around. And we were really lucky to be here in Dubai when, for lockdown, which meant Ella could co-write with her Arab collaborator, create, do everything we would normally do for our shows. So create this incredible album of music, which really then we just started to showcase and pull out these individual elements that make up our huge shows in themselves, and show that they are individual experiences in themselves. And that's what we started to do. And I think after about 6 song releases, we had over 9 million views.
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
So in the sense of how you pull together these shows, and we'll talk about 50/50 and so on, but how has that changed your thinking, Ella, at all when you're composing and when you're producing the content? Has there been a big shift or not really?
Well, that's really interesting, because actually from the very beginning, one of the things that I think makes our shows slightly different is that when I approach songwriting with any collaborator, it's songwriting. So they are kind of themed on things that are relatable for anyone from any nationality, from any culture, from any religious background, from, you know, they are basic kind of human themes, really. And so in that way, the approach has always been to create music in that kind of almost, you know, a singular piece of art, a singular piece of work, but that then can be sewn into this full score. And that has been there from the very beginning. And so then as part of that, we've always released albums, or had, even if we haven't released them yet, they are there ready to go, you know, with the album campaign once the shows go up again. But so in a sense, actually, this was a very natural, organic shift across to not only having the songs available in an audio, just as audio for album releases, but also having this visual element, which we'd done as part of our development of all of our shows. We have always put a huge amount of emphasis and a lot of funding behind filming things really beautifully. We bring in film teams that work on, you know, really big sort of blockbuster films, because then they bring a different kind of quality, not just the commercials team. Right. And so in doing that, we already had this massive bank of material that was really, really high quality, you know, like cinema level kind of quality. But we were, previous to the pandemic, only really using it as part of our promotional material and building the narrative of this, of how what the journey of the show was and what the show looked like. And now that's the addition, I would say, that has been newer, is this approach of kind of shorter pieces of film that are actually, you know, music videos in themselves. And I don't like the word content, because I think this word content gets thrown around all the time in relation to influencers and that space. And that's not taken away from influencers, but, you know, that thing of having something that is 30 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes is one thing, you know, but really what we're talking about here is, even in music videos, creating a longer piece that has more form, more structure. There's a bit more real artistry, in my opinion, to the development of music videos. And so it fits a different space. And I also believe, therefore, that it can have more impact.
How do you find the connection? I'm just curious, when you're talking about music composition and that side of your brain, but then there's another little compartment where you've got the art side. How do you find the two of them coming together?
I think that where my painting kind of character comes from is exactly the same place as where my music writing comes from. It's wanting to translate a feeling. And again, I think it's a you know, human emotion thing. And it's about, I think for me, I'm mostly about feeling the light, feeling the energy of what's going on in that particular thing. If it doesn't if it's not compositionally kind of sitting right, the image, I can't do it. But if there's something magic and something that's really, you know, literally making my skin tingle, then that's what I'm drawing on for painting. And that's exactly the same thing that happens when I'm writing music.
So this must become very interesting when you're interacting with visuals and music, and then you're part of the mix as well. How do you find your own visceral relationship with what's being created?
Oh, well, it's a total dream. I came from working 13 years, you know, surrounded by music at the Opera House. Yeah. So it's this transition into now music I think is the best in the world, written with, you know, people we love. It's amazing when these collaborations that Ella does, you see them happening. It is like watching these sort of kindred spirits come together, creating this amazing stuff. So for me, it's my dream place. My entire life is about making sure that this art that's being created reaches as many people as possible visually. And because it's an experience, that's what we produce. The feedback we've had is what makes it all worthwhile. You know, seeing the impact that these works or experiences in different languages, that people don't understand what's being sung, but they come and tell you afterwards, I could feel it. You know, I felt so emotional, or I got goosebumps, or thank you for allowing me to cry. I haven't done that. Or you can see good singers, but they weren't emotional. Your talent on stage, it was so emotional. I had such a good time. So that's why we do what we do.
And it's interesting because 13 years as a ballerina, but you're still dancing, and you still, I mean, it's interesting because you keep, there's that finite split, but as I'm listening to you talk, I'm not hearing the split. I mean, there's a punctuation there, and yes, it's different dancing in a different context, but you're still a ballerina.
Yeah. I don't think that ever leaves you, really. I don't think it leaves you. And certainly the sort of discipline that's in you when you come from that sort of artistic disciplines that Ella and I come from, our training is classical. It's rooted in hours and hours and years and a lifetime of dedication. That doesn't leave you. You just carry that approach into everything you do.
When the two of you were in kindergarten, so think back, what did you think you would be doing as adults? Did you think you'd be a ballerina? Did you think you'd be a composer, artist?
In kindergarten.
Yeah, kindergarten.
At 4, at 5.
Yeah, five. Yeah, because everyone says, "What do you?" At 5, we all have a thing. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a doctor. I want to be, a trash collector. I don't know. What did you ladies do?
I'm not sure I remember, but I was surrounded by music and art because a lot of my family have come from arts of some sort, even if it was sort of semi-professional. But my grandfather was a composer and a conductor. My grandma she just about can't play anymore, but she always played the piano a lot. My parents both in bands. My parents are both artists. So I think I probably thought I would be an artist, but I probably didn't. At that time, there was a point at which I know I found out about composers, really, and that was when I was really more like 13. I mean, I knew because I played the piano since I was 6, but I didn't really think about modern day composers. Everyone that I was playing was dead. Mozart, Brahms, Chopin, whatever, it was all from people that have not been around for hundreds of years, really. But I think before I came to this, composers are still around now. Oh yeah, okay, that thing, which was actually thanks to my music teacher at school. And whenever I get a chance to say thank you to her, I do, because I was at a rough school in Gloucester. It was a great school.
What's her name? Who is she? We need to.
Yeah, we do. We need to say thank you to her. She's Lynn Burr. And she was absolutely brilliant. And, it was quite a challenging school. Yeah. And these 2 women who ran the music department just had total control. They were absolutely brilliant. They'd make those people who made everybody else kind of quiver in their boots feel about this big. They were just brilliant. And she kind of protected me from lots of perhaps not such good behavior. I skived quite a lot of lessons that I was just not interested in at all. But I wasn't out on the field smoking. I was, in music writing and having kind of this bubble that she created for me, really. But when I think before that point, which was when I was about 13, I think, so before I was about 13, I was definitely on I want to be a performer, I think. But I'm not a performer. I'm an absolutely terrible performer, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I'm dreadful.
I never would have thought that, like, ever. That's
they're different skills, aren't they? Because Pietra's an amazing performer, and that was a big difference between our skill sets in a way.
Dancing, skating, all of these.
Yeah. Okay. I moved to the UK when I was 5. I was born in Brazil. My mum's Brazilian. And it was only when I came to UK that I started dancing because it was compulsory at my school. I sort of have a very different start in life to Ella in terms of schooling. I went to an all-girls private school that made you do ballet. And I just remember my friends being terrified. I think one of them wet themselves. And I thought, what on earth's wrong with you? We have to pretend to be princesses and dance around like magical stars. This is my absolute dream world. I will do this every day, all day, until I don't wake up. And it started from there with dancing and sort of, not really sport, but skating were sort of passions I really liked doing. And And it was a serious hobby, but it wasn't until I was 16 that I auditioned and sort of then swapped my days around and went into full-time dance training. Academics became a thing I did in the evening. So yeah, I was told, but I don't remember either, Ella. I think I think I was told I wanted to be a vet when I was little because I really like animals. But then it was pointed out to me that you have to do, you know, make horrible decisions, and I would never do that.
Interesting. Tell me about Daughters of the Wind. How did this come about? How did it start? What was that initial grain of sand that happened between you two that said, "Hey, this is a great idea"?
Shall I start?
And I just interrupt each other. I'm just going to sit back here and have some water.
Okay, so Daughters of the Wind is our Arab world show, and we, in sort of exploring what themes we felt were particular to the Arabian Peninsula, this thing of horses and what that represents was pretty large and in charge. And it's not, I think we want to make really clear with this that it's not about whether somebody is privileged enough to have a horse, because that is clearly a situation of absolute privilege. But what we liked about what it represented and what that relationship with horses represents is actually the opposite, which is that horses and that relationship with nature strips you of all of the superficial materialistic nonsense. It really, you know, takes it back to what's inside. And horses, because horses don't care what car you drive, what watch you're wearing, how much money you earn. They don't care about that stuff. It really is a kind of soul to soul connection thing. And that was what we liked about what this relationship with horses represented. And then through being in the region, I think we hear a lot about this ambition of the region, the region's environmentalism. So we wanted to kind of hinge this female character around environmentalism, which linked really nicely back to this horse relationship, and that actually she draws her inspiration and her kind of way into learning from nature through her relationship with her horse. And that was kind of what we got to. And also the fact that we've made it a lead female character is because we see lots of strong women in the UAE. There are, you know, a lot of very strong Arab women, and that is a wonderful thing, and perhaps not necessarily something that the rest of the world knows as well so much, which felt like a strong thing, because at the end of the day, the reason we wanted to do an Arab world show was because we wanted to create something that gives a really celebratory kind of space for Arab culture, because there's just not much of it present in our kind of international landscape of live entertainment. In the West End, apart from Aladdin, there isn't really anything that is representing Arab culture. Same really on Broadway. No, I'm not criticizing at all, but there is a space for it. And that's where we felt like we could help fill that space a bit.
Describe the show, because it really, and there, you know, it's just finished here in Dubai. When people are hearing this, it's done, but it's going to move on, and there are great plans. We'll talk a little bit about that, but describe the show, because it's a very interesting format that you've pulled together, that the story unfolds on multiple planes, and that really is what gives that visceral attachment to what you're doing.
Well, 50 for 50 is an experience in two parts. Act 1, you walk through 50 of Ella's stunning landscape paintings that she's done on location in every emirate over the last almost couple of years. And each piece has a soundtrack, which includes soundscapes she's recorded of, you know, these horses swimming, the birds, the Arabian-collared kingfisher, the waters in the creeks. And so it's sort of this immersive, multi-sensory exhibition part of Act 1. And then when you come to Act 2, you have a screening of Daughters of the Wind, which features all the paintings. No CGI. It was interesting. Some people actually thought there was CGI.
Really?
No, they weren't. The paintings were rigged and were kind of theatrically rigged in the theatre in Dubai Opera, moving up and down. And they represent the view through her office window, the landscape she's riding through with her horse, and features the protagonist, which in the film was played by me as a ballerina, and 2 singers singing live in Arabic and English. which is DB Gad and Maddie and Hamza. And DB Gad is Ella's co-writer. And so you that sort of wraps up the experience that you've been through and sort of culminates in the story at the end where you see the characters living in this world.
You've anecdotally shared some of the comments you've had from different people who've gone through Act 1 and Act 2. Tell us a little bit about what people are saying. And I mean, you alluded to it, but what a great feeling as creators you must have when you hear these comments from people who are having their own experience from the pieces you brought together.
I love seeing somebody applaud a TV. I think that's exactly what we wanted. You know, like clapping at the end of a song to the TV where they can't bow. It's like, yes. And because the whole experience is with headphones, so that you have this intimate, you know, best quality sonic experience. And so it makes everyone talk louder. And so there was lots of like, wow, oh, sound effects as well to part 2. Seeing people dance along and bop the whole way through, looking at a painting. Ella's literally made another dream come true, which is I've always gone to art exhibitions and wanted music for me. I didn't like the dead silence. I didn't like not having that audio connection to the artist world at the time and the mood of the painting and stuff like that. And Ella's done that. So most people comment how unique the experience is having the artist's voice, having this music, having the story, and how they love the fusion of the arts. And I think Ella says people can talk about it because of this musical element. People connect to that.
One of the things I've really noticed is that the profile of our sort of main audience for this format is exactly the same as our live shows. And that was what we hoped.
There we go.
I know. It really was a kind of like, oh, well done us, you know, kind of moment. And it's been really special to see that we've had 39 nationalities come through, and 39 nationalities where, you know, 95% of those people have really had an emotional journey and had what we understand to be a special experience with the show. And that means a lot as well, because that means we're getting it right. We're getting it right in that we're getting this kind of delivery of being able to tap into human emotions again. And that's it's not preconceived. None of that is, I think it's just very natural for us. And that's ultimately also where I think our role in society fits. You know, we create work that is about societal development, hopefully a bit of positive societal change, and that actually is for the masses. So you know, we're not doing things that are really overly conceptual. There's a conceptual element in that there's messaging that is underpinning everything that is about the societal change piece. But you know, we're not doing things where people have to really search to kind of see the meaning and to get it. And I'm not, I love some conceptual and abstract art, I really do, but it's not accessible for the masses mostly, you know, whereas what we do is perhaps not so much for those people who are seeking those very conceptual abstract experiences that kind of throw them somewhere else, which to be honest is quite a small niche audience, an important audience, but it's a small niche space. What we're doing, and what we've always done, it's exactly the same with our shows, is speaking to a bigger global audience. And that's what I think we've achieved with this. You know, people have cried, people have laughed, people have just these really kind of lovely things of seeing somebody walk through a space and be transported somewhere else and be taken on a bit of a journey. It's not going to say it's escapism, because that sounds like, you know, dramatic, or we need to escape life, but it's like it gives people a moment to just kind of just pause, just stop and kind of go somewhere else for a minute. We had this lovely comment from someone who's a teacher of autistic children who we don't know, and she, you know, she'd heard about it, but she gave a testimonial to one of our wonderful invigilators that she really enjoyed it, she really found the whole thing very special, and that in a word she would say it was very peaceful. And that's really important too, you know, that actually we can create these experiences that give people just a moment of peace and harmony. You know, that's lovely.
I love the idea that as you're going through Act 1, you're looking at the images, you've got some headphones on, so it's a very public presentation but a very private presentation as well. And that I just find that ingenious in creating an environment where people can create their own feeling to things, as opposed to sort of the wallpaper where everyone's hearing the same thing at the same time and being part of it, which is, it's just a different way of doing it. But wow.
That's so nice that you've said that, because that was the intention. We talked about, should we have speakers, because we could have. That was something that Dubai Opera, made clear we could have done. But it was a specific choice to go, let's allow everybody to have their own sort of private experience, because the moment you put headphones on, you are kind of creating a little bit of a wall or something, that gives you your own sort of, I can kind of lose myself in this for a minute. And what's also quite interesting to see is that for the first few paintings, people are a little bit fidgety. So exactly the same with the show, with every single show I think we've ever been to. It was just like, it takes a minute for people to settle in. And then they kind of go, oh, right, okay, this is what this is about. This is what this is. And by about the fifth or sixth painting or something, you really see people kind of lose themselves in it a bit. And that's, I think, where that moment of, if they like it, because, art is totally subjective and it's not for everybody, but if they like it, they can, it's like, that's where you see this moment of peace and like, oh, yeah, okay, now they're really tapping into that sort of, that heart, that soul, that emotion, that sort of heartbeat of the whole thing.
Is there a natural progression from start to end? Does it flow in, or are they each?
Yeah, we all together. So we move through the green space, the green room, into the blue space and city and the story, and then sort of come out the other side. And definitely sort of the way the score is constructed takes you on that emotional like roller coaster of a very cleverly orchestrated roller coaster to build up to the end. And then you just sort of, like it says, see people go, oh wow, and then come at the end sort of.
As cultural, I'm going to call you cultural creators, as creators of cultural artifacts and items and things. When the show's wrapping here, does that give you an opportunity to reassess and say, okay, this part really worked well. What can we add? How might we redo that? Do you go through that process as well?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that we developed the Daughters of the Wind overture was very much with this thought in mind that we could scale the cast and performing number up. Or, we can keep it to the 3 performers, and we know that Pietra and Madjan and DB will all absolutely own it because they are brilliant. And we can put it on like that with the paintings being flown in and out. And by the way, to have paintings flying in and out of a show like that, that's actual paintings, yeah, it was a first. That has never happened. No one else is mad enough to do it, I don't think. But but it is amazing. There's something very kind of moving and magical, and the dynamic of those 3, because they're such exceptional performers, with those just works perfectly. But it could also work brilliantly with a scaled up cast. We would, not sure if we're really allowed to talk about this, but we are really hoping that we're going to be able to put it on maybe in Sharjah, but we're probably not supposed to say that yet.
So what would a scaled up cast look like? When you scale this up, what are we talking?
Well, we always have
scaled up shows.
Yeah, we always have lot of singers, so, and then a lot of dancers, and a live band. Obviously everything's live, there's no miming in our shows, and everyone is working together, sharing the same space. But
that's a totally different show.
So you have these multi-disciplinary artists finding that common ground, and obviously you have the uber trained dancers and they're all professional singers, but this common ground where they all tell the same story together, and that's what we would do here. And really create that show that is celebrating and spotlighting the talent here alongside international talents.
So hypothetically, if you were to do that, when would that, what goes into, because that's a slightly different mindset from what you've created now. What goes into doing that? You've got, yes, everyone's trained and everyone is professional, but that's a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah, that's what we
That's
do.
what you do.
That's
So
what we do.
when would we expect something like that, wherever it might happen? Is that pandemic kind of related, or, we're fortunate in the UAE that things have opened up a little bit differently?
We could conceivably put it on in, let's say, April, May time, providing nothing else changes with the pandemic in the UAE. And what we would, in that iteration, we could work with more singers in the region, possibly look at incorporating a few more dancers, or people who would become part of the movement as well. But certainly on the singers front, there is a talent pool of people that we would be very happy to work with in creating essentially a choir.
Okay.
Really. And it would still maintain being that shorter overture length, because that's what we think is appropriate at this point through the pandemic, and with not being able to sort of move around our international artists. And then we would look to open the full length show that we would then tour to the West End and Singapore, and then hopefully even China, which would be very interesting.
Yeah.
From sort of 2025 is when we're looking at doing that, really.
As I'm listening to you talk about all of this, I mean, it's exciting, but I'm curious and I want to go back when you're talking about being the women bosses, and we're talking about culture, and we're talking about industry. There is a business here, but there is also, industry and business. There's a murky line between those two. What are some of the challenges you find yourselves facing as you really bring a very particular cultural industry to life? I got a check sheet of things that I would think you're facing. What are some of the challenges you face? And the follow-up question to that would be, what do you want to see happening, not just here, but globally, to encourage more of what you're doing?
Ella?
Oh, okay. All right. I can. Oh, I've got so much to say on this.
Challenge.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it could be here and around. I mean, different places have different challenges.
Well,
right?
everywhere in the world, doesn't matter where you are, funding is obviously the biggest challenge, always. Capital raising, it's an industry that isn't, and to be a female entrepreneur, business founder, it's not public knowledge that 0.0% of funding goes to female business founders from VCs. So that we're looking forward to being a big positive change, more funding going to female entrepreneurs and business owners. So funding globally is always an issue. And we've been very creative at how we've fundraised for our shows and toured them globally. And here, there are slightly different challenges, aren't there, Ella?
Yeah. So here, it feels like there needs to be a slightly different thought process to how it can be evolved in a way that is really allowing artists in the region to be their most true, authentic artist selves. And fundamentally, I think that comes down to longevity and trying to not slap a kind of business plan, GDP, economic expectation onto that growing industry too soon. And let's also perhaps for a moment think about what falls into the creative industry. I think let's separate out events, because this is one of the areas that concerns me, that people think that events are art. And it's not to say that art might not feature in events, but the business of events is completely different. And that is, therefore, you cannot kind of go, well, events do this, so therefore proper art should do this. Well, no, it doesn't work like that.
See, that's how I am. That I wouldn't even think that people would be categorizing you like that. An event is an event, and an art installation or an art production, a cultural production is a totally different thing. But I mean, you're right. Someone's sitting there with the spreadsheet saying, okay, it looks like an event. It's got a whole bunch of similarities to an event. It must be an event. It's not an event.
We've had quite a lot of people say, oh, this is your first event. Like, this is not an event. I take that as quite a massive offense, to be completely honest. I'm not taking away from what the events industry is. The events industry is brilliant. It totally has its place. But there's also, I think, this misconception of then going, well, actually, then we should apply exactly the same thinking from events to this. And also, the people who are running events are not the people who should be put in charge of the arts, because it is completely and utterly different. And the thing is, there is such huge potential in the UAE. You know, there really is massive, massive potential, such a huge melting pot of different cultures, of Arab culture, you know, it's representative of, I think it's fair to say, probably every part of Arab culture is represented in the UAE in some way. You know, the fact that we've had 39 different nationalities come through the show that is amazing, and that's a mix of residents and tourists, and that really also shows the diversity of the UAE, which is fabulous. But it's I think this thing of not having or it needing perhaps a way of a more democratized kind of pot of money that is available for artists who really have a voice and have something to say, that can add something really interesting long term to history and to arts globally, but also for the region, because if it's coming out of there, then you know, there's a bit of ownership from the region in enabling that art to happen. But the pots of money need to be there, and they need to be there not only for people who know someone. It needs to be there a bit like, I don't want to say, oh, it should be exactly the same as the Arts Council. Like, yes, do it in your own way, but the Arts Council, the thing about the Arts Council that is brilliant is anybody can apply. And there's a way of applying to the Arts Council, but it's not about who you know,
Right.
you know, and it's not about whether you're privileged enough to know that person or whatever. And that's, you know, the potential is there, but it needs to be treated long term, and it needs to be stopped. I think there's a danger in it being seen as something that is going to suddenly contribute to GDP and contribute to the economy in this huge way in a year. But it doesn't work like that. You know, in the UK, we've had centuries and centuries of a big proper industry. Our first West End theatre in London, obviously, was 400 years ago. I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that, you know, we need to wait 400 years for the creative industry to be economically viable in the UAE. But there is something to be taken from the fact that it needs really long-term support that is actually seen as a bit more of a philanthropic approach to the financing, rather than a more traditional kind of investment type approach.
Yeah. Do you get a sense that people are listening?
Listening to what?
To this whole idea, as you've just outlined it, that it's not just about profit. There's something more to this. And yes, there is a financial side to it, but that there's a reason and a need to have this, and to create funding models that work here alongside the events people. But you know, that this is a very specific thing. Do you get a sense that there are some ears that are opening a little bit to this?
I think lots of things are being said, but I think that thing of it's no. It feels like it's edging that way. Yeah. And it feels like there are also some publications that are really brilliantly kind of highlighting, look, if you say this, what's underpinning that? You know, if this is being put out, where's the thing? So one of the other things that we've talked about is the fact that if you're going to kind of create focus groups, or if there's going to be a platform for discussion about how to develop this, money needs to be earmarked and identified properly before even starting that. Like, there has to be a proper big amount of investment, whether that's probably needs to be from the government, in the same way that, you know, in a lot of the countries that have really, really strong historical arts industries, that is really only possible because of the government kind of financial support. So it needs
necessarily, sorry to interrupt, not necessarily just directly, but through then creating incentives, or the whole ecosystem of how you fund something. America is completely opposite to the UK. Right. You know, it's philanthropic circles, it's incentive, of course, Canada as well. And so it's just what is that? What are the vehicles you are supporting and putting in place to incentivize either philanthropic support, or, you know, investment, or or government support, government pots.
I mean, it's got to be kind of exciting in a sense, and frustrating that you're at a very early point here in this whole process, in this nation, that your ideas, your tenacity to get these projects going is getting people talking. And even if it's, just quietly and saying, hey, we got to do something. We got to be thinking differently about this. But 10 years down the road, they're going to say, well, Sisters Grimm, these ladies, they really got us. They're the core of some of how this started. I mean, that's got to be, you're not thinking about it, but
it does feel exciting. And that is, in the end, it's because of the potential in the region, which is why we've even got a base in the region. That is fundamentally it. And whilst we're saying these things, we're not criticizing. We're saying it because we can see what could be changed to actually achieve the things that we know that the country wants to happen. We know that top layer of people are really keen for certain things to happen. One of the things I will say that has been a really lovely thing to find out recently is that the Sultan Al-Qasimi in Sharjah, the ruler of Sharjah, I love the way that he has developed the Barjeel Art Foundation, because that has come from an authentic place for him. And that has been massively refreshing and just wonderful to realize. And he's not doing it for financial gain. He's doing it because he started collecting art that he loved, and he's got an absolutely brilliant woman working with him. They've got a great little team, but the woman that we've gotten to know is absolutely brilliant, and she really knows her stuff, and she's very authentic. And it feels like their balance is really kind of doing what we're talking about here, which is allowing the collection of the Barjeel Art Foundation and representation of Middle Eastern artists to grow in a way that is really organic and that isn't about money. Long term, there will be an economic kind of thing around it, and that will be brilliant. And it's grown to be sort of expand and not just be about kind of his voice, but ultimately it grew from his interest, and it wasn't about making money. And there are these things happening, and they're just, the potential is there because there's money in the region, and there is the possibility for lots to happen. There are certain countries where they're literally surviving day to day, so we can't put any expectations on them for anything really, just because they are literally only getting food on the table for their people. But the UAE can do stuff, and it could do stuff faster than those other territories. So it does feel exciting, and it does feel like things will evolve and change. And it is that thing of feeling, there's the potential here. Oh, but it's so frustrating. Oh, but the potential is here. And, we love lots of things about the place, but all these things are, but, we can see how things could grow and how actually more could happen, and how, more of a safe space for artists to really do something that is their own authentic voice could kind of exist. Oh, but it's not happening yet, all that kind of thing.
It's going to.
On a lighter note, I'm really curious. You invest a whole bunch of your time into your crafts, into what you're doing with your projects. What do you do on your downtime? What's your
downtime? Downtime. I think you were saying, when you are fortunate enough to have made your life out of your passions, there isn't a clocking off time and a time off. It's always. Probably no surprise we're both single, because we're just so dedicated and involved and in everything we do. And it's,
Can I say one of the things that we do in our downtime that we do together, and it's sort of downtime, not really downtime. When we have been places and we've gone like, right, okay, we're going to have 3 days of not doing emails or whatever. Pietra reads aloud. We pick a book. Pietra reads aloud, and I paint. So
you read.
She'll paint the scene that we're in, and I will perform the book out loud over 3 days. Finish the book.
That's rather
with all the voices.
That's
well, because if I don't read aloud, I sort of tend to fall asleep when I read to myself. So I prefer to, dedicate the time off and read the book out loud.
See, no, that's kind of fun. I never would have done.
I'll tell you what else though, the other thing that's great about that is it also means that Pietra is really good at reading the scripts for any presentations that we need to do. So I'm the I'm the eldest of 6, and I used to get my little sister to read to me because I thought it would be good practice for her if she ever needed to present anything. And that was part of the thinking as well. I think we started it maybe 6-7 years ago or something. It's like,
This my few years, and I read a book.
Very nice.
Yeah,
that's very fun. That's awesome. So now are you heading back to the UK because New Year's is coming up?
No, I'm staying here throughout Christmas and New Year's, and Ella comes back just after Christmas, so we'll both be.
So you get the New Year's.
Both be here for
New Year's getaway. So last kind of thing. We know the show is wrapped. We know things are moving. You mentioned the Burj.
Burj, yes, the art moves out of is living in the Burj, 50 for 50, Burj Khalifa, in a music and art studio that we have there, where Ella's written and recorded the songs, and the paintings will live there until they tour.
So here's the question. There's 50 of them.
There are.
How are you organizing them in the space? How does that work?
Oh, it's funny. I mean, it's a beautiful space, and they fit there, and it's where we sort of built and put together the sort of narrative journey through the artworks. And it looks totally empty when they're out. You realize each one does have, it kind of feels like, oh, where did everybody go? They take on such a sort of, they do become characters, each painting has a personality, and I kind of miss them when they're not there. And it feels empty. And it's only when we sort of installed them in this linear atrium of Dubai Opera, I was like, oh my goodness, Ella, it's 70 meters of art. And it doesn't feel like that in the Burj. They feel very much, it really feels like sort of you're in this doll's house world.
Yeah. Actually, I'm just thinking back to the 50 for 50, and different times of the day would be a totally different experience.
Absolutely.
So, come in the morning, come in the afternoon, come at night, where you've got different lighting.
We've had repeat visitors. So we had people that have come in the evening, first of all, and then they've come back to experience in the day and said how different it is, how they love both, but as the sunlight is changing, and the light here in the UAE is just so beautiful that as the sun is setting and you get that warm glow and it transitions into night, which actually follows the narrative of the paintings as well. It ends with full moon on Kite Beach, very sort of emotional, large scale piece, and people have really responded to the light in the space as well.
Oh man, so exciting. You know what? This has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed having this conversation. I'm glad the two of you could make time to do it from London and here in country. This is what a privilege for me. I really.
It's been great to chat. Thank you.